Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to call to order the April 24th, 2024 City of Asheville Multimodal Transportation Commission meeting. My name is Jack Eigelman and I'm the chair of this group. Our meetings continue to be held virtually, but there are many ways for interested parties to participate. The City of Asheville's engagement hub, which includes a variety of links and phone numbers, can be found on the Multimodal Transportation Commission page of the City of Asheville's website. Visiting the page is the best way to take part in our virtual meetings. Members, staff, and guests, please remember to keep your microphones muted at all times. So when you're not speaking, we can minimize feedback and other background noises. I'd like to now welcome our commission members. Members, when I call your name, please introduce yourself and let us know what interest you represent. And I'll start with Vice Chair Kenny Armstrong.
Hey, Kenny here. I'm an at-large member.
Thanks, Kenny. Joe Chesler.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Joe Chesler, West Asheville resident, Transit Committee liaison.
Thanks, Joe. And Leanna Joyner is absent today. Bill Loftus is absent. Elise Martyr.
Hi, I'm Elise Martyr. I am an at-large representative.
Thanks, Elise. Randy Warren.
Hi, Randy Warren. I'm an at-large member, but I attend the active trans meetings.
And finally, Mike Zukowski is absent today, recovering from surgery. However, that gives us 5, so we have a quorum, so we can vote on anything that we need to. And our non-voting commission members, Jake Smith, would you introduce yourself, Jake?
Sure. Thanks, Jack. I am Jake Smith, non-voting member of the MMTC and also a board member of the Neighborhood Advisory Committee.
And Jared Wheatley represents the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't think, Jared, are you out there? Jared is not. And Maggie, our council liaison, Maggie Ullman, is not feeling well, so she will not be present today. And we have a few, I'd like to welcome the city staff members that are here to present. I think that's Haley Burton will be presenting a little bit later, and Jessica Morris as well. So we will, is there a motion then to approve the agenda for today, April 24th?
Sure, I'll motion to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Randy. Is there a second?
Elise, I'll second.
And is there any discussion, any corrections, by the way, to the agenda?
Yeah, Jack, question?
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Do we want to, on the important documents information list, do you want to add a regular report by the patent corridors working group, or is that that's great. Yeah, I think we should do that regularly for sure. So in future agendas, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. And Elise?
I'm noticing now that both in the header as well as in the call to order section, it's listing the date as April 14th instead of April 24th.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Let's correct that for the record. Today is the 24th. Lucy, do you see that? Any other corrections, additions, or edits before we vote to approve? Okay, so we'll vote on approving the agenda. So committee members, when I say your name, please say aye or nay. Kenny?
Aye.
Joe,
Yes, aye.
let's see, Elise,
Aye.
Randy,
I
and I'm an aye, and so the motion carries and the agenda is approved. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our working meeting on March 27th? And by the way, whoever did the minutes, thank you for the level of detail, is really helpful. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move. I agree there.
Any, and a second?
All second.
Thanks,
Elise.
Elise. Was that you, Elise, seconding? Yeah, okay. Are there any edits, corrections, or discussion of those minutes before we vote to approve? All right, so let's take a vote on approving the minutes. Kenny,
Yep.
Joe,
Yes.
Elise,
Yes.
Randy,
wasn't here, so I need to abstain.
and I am an aye, so the motion carries to approve the minutes for March 27th.
Jack, excuse me.
Yeah.
I wasn't present either. I'm wondering if another abstention would change the vote.
So technically, even though you weren't here, they count an abstention as a yes. And I know that's weird, but that's
Okay,
the way the rules are written.
Thank you. You better mark me down as an abstention then. Thank you.
Okay, we'll amend that, Joe. So that's 3. Yeah, Elise, question.
If I'm recalling from the last meeting, Leanna also was trying to abstain because she wasn't there, but we're like under an obligation to provide a vote unless for some reason we have a conflict of interest that would make us ineligible to vote.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so we would essentially count the abstention as affirmative. Is that right, Jessica?
Yeah, I believe so. Unless for some reason, I think you could say nay, but I'm not sure why anyone would.
Yeah, Randy, question.
Yeah, I
Just
think that,
minutes.
yeah, by abstaining in this situation, we're not saying they aren't correct. We just can't verify the accuracy.
Yeah.
So it's like a tacit approval. So it's not.
Yeah, fair. So I believe, and unless anyone else has comment or input, I believe that motion carries and the minutes are approved. Nicole, I don't believe there are any public comments. Do I have that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And announcements, I don't have any planned announcements. We will try and save time, of course, at the end of the meeting to hear back from various committees. Are there any brief announcements that anyone would like to share related to our work? Randy?
Yeah, I'll send something on this for next meeting, but there's an organization called goodforus.org, which is trying to change the way we perceive transportation in America. And so just to give you a little primer for that, it's trying to start off like an AAA model of funding and using AARP a lot too, and not funding, but participation in this, and talks about how just a small number of people end up changing the landscape of transportation, or in the case of AARP, advocacy. And so this organization is trying to do a similar thing. And I'll send out some information for us to review before the next meeting. So it's not necessarily, it is pertinent to us here because we were a small piece of this larger movement. Hopefully it's happening across the country, but it'll also be something that we can spread to our networks and hopefully get a lot of founding members this year to start off this movement.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Randy. Any other announcements, folks? Kenny.
Just a reminder of Asheville on Bikes Spring Out event, which is this Saturday. Saturday afternoon, look out for large crowds of cyclists downtown and be mindful and respectful if you're not participating.
Yeah, lovely. Anyone else, folks? Any announcements to add? Okay. If not, we'll go on to new business. And our first item of business is North Carolina Department of Transportation Small Construction Funds Projects Council Resolutions. And I'm going to hand that off to Jessica to explain. Jessica.
Sure. So the two items here are items that will go to council in May. I'm not sure yet if it'll be the 14th or the 28th, probably the 28th. But whenever DOT has a project that they're going to do in a city or a county that costs over $250,000, they need to have a resolution of support from that jurisdiction. And so this is something that comes up periodically, and there was one not too long ago that came before you guys that involved a right turn lane extension, I think on Sand Hill Road, and there was some sidewalk that was moved, and we were able to look at that project and I think ask them to reduce the turning radius on that project. So this is an example of that. These are two projects that they've brought to us. And one of them, I'll do the Long Shoals Hendersonville Road intersection one first. And I will share my screen just to give you guys an idea of where we're looking at. This one is the least exciting of the two in terms of our purview, but what you're looking at is Hendersonville Road going north-south and Long Shoals Road going east, off to the west. I think the plan sheets that are included are oriented slightly differently. But what they're proposing to do is make this existing southbound right turn lane longer. You can see how it kind of narrows here once it gets to this Advanced Auto Parts store driveway. So what they're planning to do is extend this turn lane and make it longer, which means that they will be pushing back these sidewalks here. So they'll be reconstructing the sidewalks as is. And also we are working with them to include the transit stop pouring an ADA pad as well. So that was one opportunity that we saw for coordination with them so that we could get an improved bus stop with an appropriate ADA landing pad. And so the plan sheets are included in your agenda as well if you wanted to take a look. But I did not see any real opportunities for anything significant that we could ask of them to do. But if you guys have any comments, we will take those and we will provide those to DOT.
Randy, you're up first, then to Joe.
Yeah, so it's in my area of town, the south side there, and so I travel that fairly frequently. Right, so there's a couple of comments. One is Asheville I, which is actually there it's listed as Stanton Gabriel something OD, but that's an Asheville I location, and that is already problematic getting in and out of there because there's this entrance you can see in the picture here, then just to the north there's a second entrance, and so I'm not sure if they it's what they can do with that entrance there too. But when it gets busy and it's backed up, that's a problem with people trying to come in and out of that one, especially if they're trying to come out and turn left. So
Mhm.
that's a challenge. So they may want to look at that more closely. And then the more pertinent to us is that the long-term plan has Long Shoals Road having bike lanes on it. And because right now to get to the TC Roberson campus there with all the K through high school campus, there's really no bike access at all to there. And yet in the long-term plans, there is. An overlook is a big issue because of the narrowness of the road and the hill, an overlook coming off of Hendersonville to the north. So the bike lanes on Long Shoals are crucial there to provide some kind of connectivity. And so I think that anytime we do something with the road here, we need to prepare for those bike lanes to get in place, even though I know there's no immediate plans for those bike lanes to be installed. It is in the long-term plans, and NCDOT has it in their long-term plans too. So we know it will happen, hopefully, eventually. So I think we need to make sure that they prepare for bikes to be coming down the road, turning right into a bike lane. So that, and I know they're not planning on having a bike facility there. The Hendersonville Road study, I think, does have for sure has a side, as a multi-use trail on the west side of the road there. And I'm not sure how far that goes down, to be honest. Right now, I'm guessing it might come all the way down to here. But there should be some prep for that. So I'm not sure. For example, at the Overlook one, NCDOT has agreed, it's not in yet, to put a bike markings, because they added that right turn lane that took away a pedestrian and bicycle used area. And so they've agreed to put in bike symbols and then like a skip dash line bike facility that goes through the Overlook right turn only lane. So maybe they could do something like that here too, where they could somehow let people know that if bikes are going to go straight, they can maybe occupy the lane going forward, or if they're turning right, they should share the lane with bikes. But they seem like that we should get some kind of improvement on this to prepare for future improvements too. Not just to have them simply facilitate more car traffic, but also to encourage, even though I know Hendersonville Road, everybody thinks I'm crazy for riding my bike on it, but I do. And eventually, we need to be able to have people have access to that whole school by a non-motorized transportation, which, except for the immediately adjacent neighborhoods, there isn't any. So anytime there's any kind of thing done, we need to push for a bike improvement. And so I think that, again, maybe they could formally designate bike movements at this intersection along with aiding the car movements.
Jessica, can you respond to that? Like, maybe is there more context, or I'm curious if we could, that's a good point, Randy, about the Asheville I and having two entrances. Can you close an entrance? I'm not proposing that we do, but that is a horrible spot.
That is something that would be completely in NCDOT's purview. And my guess is that would be very challenging for being, for them to suggest that. I don't think they could require it.
I think they might be able, I know, for example, Matthew, sorry to cut in, but Matthew's school on Sardis Road, NCDOT forced the school to agree to have a right turn only out of their exiting facility. Maybe here we should ask for them to have a right turn only for that exit from Asheville I, because trying to turn left northbound out of that exit there, it's just a recipe for crashes.
That's a good idea. Yeah, we can talk to them about that. We can put all of these comments together.
Great.
And see if we can work with them to maybe even make some changes before this goes.
The Advanced Auto Parts should have the same situation too. I'm not sure if turning left is legal there because they're crossing that center line paint or not. But if it is legal, they probably shouldn't do that either there.
Joe is in the queue. Joe, you want to share your comment, please?
Yeah, it just appears, following up on Randy's comment, it appears that they're forcing by design a left turn only there, but that'd be interesting to see. Jessica, you mentioned one of the components of the improvement is an ADA pad, landing pad. One of the things that frustrates me, and I've commented on it before, is the need for bus pullouts from the lane of travel, which of course affects the flow of cars and bicycles. Does the ADA pad include a pullout, or is that a different component, a different design element?
So actually, Joe, it's no longer really the transit world's best practice to do pullouts. And that's mostly because of challenges with re-entering the traffic stream. So it's not really something that you see agencies doing anymore because it has such a bad impact on transit's ability to stay to keep their on-time performance. So there's actually been studies done that it generally has little impact on traffic, but buses have a really hard time getting back into the stream. So it's not something that that transit agencies are really doing anymore, and is not something that I think that we would be pursuing anymore either.
Great, that's a great answer. Thank you.
Sure.
But what is the nature of the ADA pad design then? It's just a hardscape arrangement so that the ramp can drop into the pad?
Exactly. Yeah, it's really kind of making a little connection over that green space as part of it, and also making sure that it's that area is wide enough for wheelchairs to enter and exit and turn around. So I don't know how wide the sidewalk is right here at the moment. I'm guessing it meets our standard 5 feet, although it looks a little wider than that just looking at it on the aerial, but making sure that it meets the ADA standards for access at that stop.
Great, thank you very much.
Randy, back to you for comment.
Sorry, thanks. So the ADA pad doesn't include a cement infrastructure on where the bus park stops, because I know in a lot of other places when they have the bus stops, and they'll put cement there because the buses tend to sink as they're stopped frequently. Well, of course, in our case, not so frequently, but at the bus stops. So that wouldn't be a part of the project.
No. This is not. It wouldn't be pulling over. The ADA pad is just the where the bus would stop, and then if there's someone who needs wheelchair access, it has that sidewalk connection or from curb to sidewalk connection to meet ADA standards. And I think we might, if I'm remembering correctly, I think we might actually be asking them to move the bus stop farther south so that it's closer to the main intersection as well. But I'm looking at the plans right now and I'm not able to recognize exactly where it's being moved, but that was something that we discussed with them as well.
Yeah, that'd be an important point too, because otherwise that encourages people to cross the street.
Right. Yeah.
Intersection, and that's a dangerous place to do. So
yeah, if I find that on the plans, I will point it out.
Elise has a comment. Elise, floor is yours.
Just speaking of finding things on the plans, I have no idea how to read these, and I would love it if someone who does would want to like get with me and just sort of explain a little bit of what's going on here.
Yeah, it can be challenging even for people like me that are used to looking at them, but and I don't know how much more. So basically what they're trying to show here is the gray line is where the new sidewalk would be moved back to, and this these harder black lines, that is the existing sidewalk. So they're trying to show like a before and after essentially. And then this actually right here is where the new bus pad would be. I was finally able to read this, and it would also be big enough for us to add a shelter in the future if we can. So I don't know if that helps, Elise, but the hard lines are the existing and the gray is the future. And so everything is essentially going to be shifted because they're going to be widening the lane to make it a longer right turn lane.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, that certainly that it allows me to at least understand something about what's going on here.
Yeah.
Get back to us, Elise, when you get a civil engineering degree.
And I don't know what driveway this is, but I'm guessing this is the
Jessica, I can't see your pointer. Are you trying to point that out on your shared screen?
I was trying to. This driveway here in the middle of the screen, I think that is the driveway to the eye doctor that Randy was talking about, and that the one towards the right of the screen is the driveway to the auto parts store, I think.
For the sake of time, while it would be good to analyze these more in depth, let's move on to the second project, unless there are any other comments related to the Hendersonville Road and Long Shoals intersection. Are there any other comments? Okay. So Jessica, you want to tell us about this? Sounds like the more exciting project, Smoky Park Highway on the west side.
I'm sorry. Before we move on, I'm sorry. Can we look at the Jessica? I'm sorry. Can we look at the Hendersonville Road corridor study too, just to see how that plan interfaces with these designs? Because that's the whole reason why we did the study, right? So that anytime that because there might be a treatment already suggested in that plan, and I'm sorry, I didn't prepare far enough in advance to be able to see that. But if there is, I think that we need to make sure that NCDOT is aware of that, especially since they were a partner in that study. So.
Right. Yes, we will definitely do that. Thank you, Randy, for bringing that up.
Great point. Go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, so the other one is, like I said, I think more exciting because it involves building pretty decent chunks of sidewalk and filling sidewalk gaps on a stretch of road that desperately needs it and where we've seen fatalities, unfortunately. So this is Smoky Park Highway. This is the vicinity map. So it's both north and south, or east and west, whatever direction you want to call it, of the I-40 corridor. And so I'll just bring that up here on the map too a little bit so you can see. Let me switch tabs. Generally where we're talking about. So if you're familiar with this area, I think that there was a fatality maybe 2 or so years ago in this general vicinity here. And we've got sections of sidewalk that have been built, like this looks pretty new, but then we've got gaps, little gaps here and there. And so this project is seeking to close a lot of the gaps that are present. And let me switch back to the plans. So on the second page of the plans, this is just kind of showing you where the different sections that they're going to be doing. This is like what you would think of as like a summary sheet for these big plan sets. Not super helpful, but I don't know that I'm trying to see. So then there's plan sheets in here that get into each section in more detail. So this is where they've got existing sidewalk. This is near the Dunkin' Donuts, which I think is on the north or the east side of the I-40. And so these gray areas are where they would be adding sidewalk. So across I don't think that they really mean that they're going to be crossing these driveways with sidewalk. Maybe they are, actually. That's something I should clarify. Leveling those driveways out so that they're ADA compliant. But these medians would have new sidewalk. And I'm not going to necessarily go through every single plan sheet here, but it's relatively expensive. I mean, extensive and probably expensive. But they're looking to close some of these gaps on both sides of Smoky Park Highway.
Randy, comment.
Sorry. So one thing we got to make sure that they do, because the NCDOT seems to have challenges with this, is to put stop bars when they put crosswalks. At least, when they should put at least international crosswalks across these driveways if they don't even flatten them out. Which, of course, if they touch it, I think they're supposed to flatten them out too, because I think every project is supposed to be ADA compliant if they touch it. But frequently they don't put stop bars there, which I know people ignore anyway. But at least they should be there. Even if they ignore them, because then if a crash does happen, they can, at least have some liability in the person who didn't stop at the stop bar.
Yeah, can you explain that real quick, Randy?
What's that?
Can you explain a stop bar real quick?
Oh, sure. A stop bar is just a solid, 8 inches of white paint or thermoplastic on the road before the intersection. And that is where you're required to stop in order to make sure that traffic is clear, both pedestrian and car traffic. So frequently there's design issues with stop bars because they're placed in places sometimes you can't actually see very well, but because they have to be back before a crosswalk or sidewalk or whatever, technically you're supposed to stop there first, see if it's safe to proceed, because if there's someone in the sidewalk, for example, you could see that. And then you can proceed across the sidewalk to look to see if there's traffic in the roadway. So the idea is that you'd stop. So this one here, it shows you right there. Yep, where to get Jessica's pointer is. That's a stop bar. So they're supposed to stop there first, even though they probably can't see to the left if cars are coming, but they can see if someone's coming across the crosswalk. And then if the crosswalk is clear, then they can proceed forward into closer to the intersection to see if it's clear for them to go from there. And so it's just important to have those there though, because otherwise people just run right across the crosswalk and see if they can see, and they're not really paying attention to pedestrians at all. So it's just important to have them put that as a part of their plan and then actually to put it in. Because on the Hendersonville Road sidewalk project that happened years ago now on the east side, there's several spots there that don't have the cross bars, even though legally there was in their plans, and not all legally, but it wasn't their plans. They were supposed to put them in. They didn't put them in every place, and it just causes issues for pedestrians.
Yeah.
It's kind of inconsistent. So we'll make that note. Some of the driveways have that treatment and some of them don't. I don't know if there's some standard that they follow, but we'll seek clarification on that as well.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Jessica, do you know what the cost of this project is, or is it still in the planning phase?
Okay, so let's see. The Smoky Park Highway sidewalk project, they've only done 25% plans. So I think this cost estimate seems a little low to me, but I could be wrong. But they've estimated $750,000. And I don't know like what the total linear feet of new sidewalk is, but it seems pretty substantial. And then the other project, the turn lane on Hendersonville Road, that's at 75%. So their estimate is $1,150,000, and that includes the engineering, the right of way, and the construction.
Okay. Joe, you have a comment. Floor is yours.
Yes, Jessica, is there a cost share for the city in this, or is this all state?
It's all state. The only thing is that we provided $5,000 of transit funds for the transit bus pad on the Hendersonville Road, but there's no match. This is all state funding.
Thank you.
Jessica, this is perhaps beyond our purview, but to make walking slightly more inviting in this area, is there a possibility of planting some trees in the green space as part of the project?
That's something I can ask them about. DOT doesn't love trees, highways, but that is a good question, especially if it's on the other side of the sidewalk. They're more likely to do it, but I can ask.
Okay.
I'm not confident that they would agree.
Yeah, fair, but I think it'd be nice. This is an
Yeah.
area that desperately needs some more canopy in places that obviously where we can do it safely.
Yeah, agreed.
You all, any other questions before we move on? Any other comments or input on these two DOT projects? Elise.
I guess I just kind of have an observation because I'm looking on the map here at what is this? The section there's a plan here that shows like Starbucks on one side on one quadrant and Wendy's on another quadrant. This appears to be the intersection of Smoky Park and Montgomery. I don't know if you want to zoom in to that curb cut that's right there at the corner of Montgomery. Yeah, right there. Where is that going? Like, who do we think is, like, you're not crossing the street over to the north side of the street there. You're probably not using that to cross from west to east. It seems like a good idea, but how practical is that? And I don't really expect an answer. I'm kind of just like,
So the orientation of curb cuts isn't meant to signal the direction of crossing. I know that sounds unintuitive, but that's why we're seeing more double curb cuts where they're trying to line them up with the direction of crossing. But these older ones, one thing that we can ask them too is if these are going to be updated at all, or if they're not touching any of the existing infrastructure. But I imagine that this is meant to. Are you talking about this one on the north side or on the east side?
no, I'm talking about the one on the west side. Yeah, that one there.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it almost seems like I don't understand why it's there at all. I feel like, like if someone's on that sidewalk, they're probably just walking along, along and around the corner.
Right.
I don't see
that's a good
anyone
question.
who maybe has a mobility issue trying to cross the street in either direction.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. After looking at it more closely, we'll ask them about that too. I'm trying to look on the plans where Montgomery is.
I think
Because I was thinking maybe they were going to extend it.
1, 2, 3. Wait, which one is it? It's
6.
2. It's the third page of like segments. It has Starbucks up in one quadrant and Wendy's over in another quadrant. That one.
This one?
Yeah. Right in the on the bottom there.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And like I said, I don't really expect an answer. I would just want to maybe encourage whoever makes these plans to actually be thoughtful and critical and not just say like, oh, well, let's put in a curb cut. What a great idea. Look how ADA compliant we're being, when like, I don't feel like this is a useful place for one if we're like being critical about it.
Randy, floor is yours.
So sometimes, at least usually it's by state. So the federal government has guidelines and then the state has to decide. So in Michigan, for example, if the crosswalk's ever going to go in there, they need to build the facilities to facilitate that at some point in time. In Illinois, it's the opposite. Unless a crosswalk already exists, they cannot put a curb cut there because, so it's different states are different ways. So I'm not sure what the North Carolina law is about this, but my guess is that there's a rule that says if you could have a crosswalk there eventually, they need to put the facilities in now when they build it. And then they need to make it ADA accessible too. And this is interesting here because if you notice the site pad, the one with the little pad with the bumps on it so that a visually impaired person can feel it with their cane, doesn't cover the whole part. So I'm guessing that only covers it in the part that's flush with the surface of the street and it probably rises up on both sides.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it should be extended further out too. So there's all these different rules that are applied for these things. So they don't usually just do it willy-nilly. It's usually because they've got a standard that they have to implement, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense now. And it's kind of like we talk about with the bike network too. Sometimes it seems silly to put a 1 block long bike lane in where it doesn't connect to anything else. But if you don't put that 1 block long bike lane there, then you can't connect it to anything else that ever gets built ever, and nothing ever gets built unless it's built in the entirety, which never happens. So, here, they should have, the turning radius should be less in my mind, unless there's 18-wheelers pulling in there often. And they should have an international crosswalk already across there, because there is pads on both sides, which indicates there's probably some pedestrian traffic either currently or in the future that will go across there. So, but my guess is that they're required by the standards to prepare for the eventuality of that being connected.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, Kenny.
Just to Randy's point earlier on the other project, I looked at the Hendersonville Road corridor study, and it does have a 10-foot multi-use path going along the entire western edge of Hendersonville Road. So might be good to point out to DOT, just this is what we want.
Yeah.
Elise, back to you.
Yeah, thanks Randy for explaining that. I really do appreciate that. And I like looking at the plan here, I'm wondering if they're already, in this area working on sidewalk stuff, if it might make sense to move that curb cut like around that curve south a little bit, so that, eventually if a crosswalk was put in, it might make a little more sense to cross to that median and then cross to the median to the other side. I don't know if that's something we could ask them to look into.
Yes,
Joe?
we certainly
Oh,
can.
sorry, Jessica. Joe, go ahead. The floor is yours. And
Yeah,
we'll
just
take one more comment from Joe.
Real brief. It appears to me that this is the entrance to 84 Lumber, and
Yes.
so you probably have historically a lot of large tractor trailers or large trucks pulling into that. I'm not sure how that's going to affect the future redesign of this intersection, if it at all is ever to happen. But anyway, it's a great discussion, and Randy, thanks for your input.
Jessica, can we send you comments within a couple of weeks if we happen to be in this area looking at it and have thoughts?
Yeah, that would be just fine.
Yeah, encourage folks to get out there, get on the ground if you can. Great comments. And just for whoever's counting, at the top of the page, they spelled Smoky wrong on the very first page under location, but we'll just leave that to them. They're engineers, not editors. So anyway.
The other one said Dervway instead of driveway. So
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe they designed it.
Yeah. Thanks, folks. But we'll not worry about their spelling. We are worried about their sidewalks and stuff like that. So great comments. Thank you all for really thoughtful.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
I learned a lot just by listening in on these conversations. Okay, our next agenda item, folks, is to appoint Elise Martyr for a full term on the MMTC. Elise was appointed to the MMTC Commission on March 14th, 2023, to serve the unexpired term of Maggie Ullman. And that term is set to expire on July 1st, 2024. So I think this is an item that we need to motion and vote on. Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
I motion that we appoint Elise Martyr to a full term on the MMTC. I think she's been a fantastic addition to the group, and I love her perspective and her unique outlook on things. And she's always adding a lot of really great things to every meeting that I've been to with her, and appreciate the fact that she's willing to give her time to this group and hope that it continues.
Yeah, is there a second?
Yes, I'll second. It's Joe.
Thanks.
And to Randy's points, Elise has been a great contributor and an analytical voice on our transit working group as well, and really appreciate her participation. I would
Y'all, any other-
second.
Thanks, Joe. Any other comments or discussion? Elise?
I just want to say that I've really enjoyed working with this group, and I'd be really honored to continue serving on this group.
Lucy Crown?
I also would like to let everyone know that Kenny and Joe Chesler, their positions are also expiring on July 1. So they've been asked to consider sitting for another term, and we will need to have the answers by next month so that we can take the names to council for reappointment.
And you also still have one open spot.
Yes, that's correct. Joe Barker's spot is open, and I believe that the opening, we are accepting applications right now, and I think that it is April 28th is the deadline. And so you will consider new names and maybe some familiar ones too next month for that empty space.
Awesome. Randy has a comment.
Sorry, I don't mean to delay the vote, but I think my term might be expiring also in June. We might double check that. Mine was a little convoluted because I got reappointed at one point, and actually I've served for 7 years, which isn't supposed to be the case, but it got, I was happy to take the extra year, but I think it might be up.
It looks like yours is up on July 1st, 26.
Okay.
According to the roster here.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that'd be 8 years, but I'm fine doing it if you guys don't want to kick me off. But it's up to you. Obviously, I don't want to be
double check.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll double check.
Yeah, Elise, back to you. Comment.
I just wanted to plug that the clerk's office has started to use a new software to track the board members and commissions. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat that shows the MMTC page, and you can see when everyone started it and when their terms end. So
awesome.
just FYI.
Okay. Y'all, let's if there is no further comment, let's take a vote on appointing Elise to a full term on MMTC. And when I call your name, if you would respond either aye or nay. Kenny Armstrong.
Aye, of course.
Joe Chesler.
Aye.
And does Elise vote on herself? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, Elise Martyr. You gotta vote for yourself. Yeah.
Or is it
Randy
me?
Warren. Yeah, me. Randy Warren.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and it is unanimous that Elise will serve. Thank you, Elise, for your service to the city. Thank you, everyone, and service to the city, by the way. All right, so moving on to our next agenda item is to appoint new members of the Active Transportation Committee. And Mimi Gordon and Katie, I believe it is pronounced Katie Mullen. And so these, just for context again, that these have been vetted and have been approved by the Active Transportation Committee, which is one of our two subcommittees. They're everything but buses, I guess you could say. Maybe that might be a great description. But anyway, is there a motion to appoint Mimi Gordon and Katie Mullen to the Active Transportation Committee?
Yeah, I'll move.
Kenny moves. Is there a second? Yes, Randy.
I'll second.
Randy's a second. Any comments or questions before we take a vote?
I think, Lucy, is this actually makes the Active Transportation Committee full, right? Is this fill it up?
Yes, these two will fill up the committee.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah, that's great, y'all. Good news there. It sounds like two great members. So we will take a vote to approve the two for the Active Transportation Committee. Kenny.
Aye.
Joe
Absolutely.
and Elise,
Aye.
Randy,
I
and I am an I. So the motion passes, and they are now, I guess, yeah, now they're on the committee. Doesn't require, doesn't
No,
require.
just approval from your commission.
Okay, excellent. Our next item on the agenda is the Reed Creek feasibility study presentation and a letter of support. And I'm going to give the floor to transportation staff member Haley Burton. Haley.
Thanks, Jack. I'll say that I'm feeling a little nervous about my spelling in this presentation now with how detail oriented you are, but hope we do.
We'll have mercy on you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm here to present on our Reed Creek Greenway feasibility study and really our final recommendations. And I'll also just go ahead and say at the end of this presentation, if you all are supportive of our recommendations, we're seeking a letter of support for this project and can have some discussion around that towards the end of the presentation. So this first slide is just showing a basic overview of our project scope and where we started. So as you all likely know, there is an existing portion of the Reed Creek Greenway. It goes from Broadway and W.T. Weaver and then terminates down at Elizabeth Street and Elizabeth Place in the Montford neighborhood. And so this study is looking at extending the existing greenway both to the north and to the south. The northern section is looking at making a connection to Broadway and Riverside Drive, where it would connect with two future planned greenways, one along Riverside Drive and one for the town of Woodfin's future greenway. The southern portion of this study is looking at making a connection through the Montford neighborhood and then ultimately ending up at the existing pedestrian bridge near Isaac Dixon Elementary School. And there was some scope that changed a bit through feedback in the southern corridor, which we'll get into as this progresses. I also just wanted to call out on the right side of this page, there's an overview of a greenway implementation process in case people aren't familiar. So first, the idea for a greenway connection is identified in a plan. I believe this greenway is identified in our Greenway Master Plan and also as a priority greenway in our recently adopted GAP plan. Then comes the phase that we're in now, which is a feasibility study to still stay a little high level, but start identifying the actual route and corridor for the greenway to go along without getting too into the details of design. And then future phases include that detailed design, what will it actually look like, how can this get constructed, as well as any necessary land acquisition, getting easements, potentially moving utilities, and once funding is acquired, actual construction of the greenway. So we're pretty early on in this process. We don't have a funding source identified for construction, but that is, hopefully the goal in the next couple of years. So in terms of the feasibility study itself, we're towards the very end of the process. We've done a lot of data gathering, site visits, lots of different engagement with various stakeholders, and ultimately we've gotten to our final recommendations, which after a few more rounds of both information sharing and some final feedback, we'll put those into an actual report and feasibility study, which will take to council to hopefully be adopted. We've done a lot of public and stakeholder engagement as part of this project, starting in August of last year. We had a public survey that was open from August 21st to October 1st, and we got over 1,000 respondents in that survey. Generally, the feedback from that survey was very positive. People want this greenway, they're excited for it. And they had some good comments that also helped influence some of the recommendations that we'll get into more later. We've also had various stakeholder meetings, including NCDOT, UNC Asheville, Botanical Gardens, different landowner coordination meetings. We've met multiple times with the Chamber of Commerce, presented to the Montford Neighborhood Association, Asheville City Schools, different internal city departments, and then we've met with the Asheville Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities for some coordination. And then we have a steering committee that's been a big part of feedback throughout this process. That's made up of different internal staff and then also different stakeholders above. So NCDOT, UNC Asheville, and some representation from the Montford Neighborhood Association. And then just 2 weeks ago, we had an in-person public open house showing our draft recommendations. It was pretty well attended. And generally the feedback again was positive. People are excited. And for the people living in Montford, once they understood parking was not being removed in front of their house, they were supportive and in favor of this greenway. Also, I realized that not listed here, we've given updates to the Active Transportation Committee throughout this process. And we also, they've passed a letter of support in support of these recommendations. So this slide, I just want to quickly show all of the alternatives that we initially considered in the Northern Corridor. We don't have time today to go through every single, like a deep analysis of every single thing that was initially considered, but we're looking at Broadway Street, making that connection to Riverside Drive. And we looked at options on the east side of Broadway and trying to get closer to the creek, which ultimately wasn't feasible. And then some different options for going along the west side of Broadway Street. And we'll get into more details later on. This is again showing everything that we initially considered as part of the Southern Corridor studies and different potential routes. You can see here that, so this is Flint Street, and over here, I don't know if you can see my cursor actually, but the Montford Bridge. One thing that we heard from the survey and also the feedback from working with the neighborhood was, in addition to making this connection to the existing pedestrian bridge, people wanted a more direct connection downtown. And so that's something that we looked into and became part of our recommendations through this process. And I'll just go ahead and note now this, if you've seen this pedestrian bridge by Isaac Dixon Elementary School lately, it's not in the best shape, but that's something that's going to be redesigned and redone as part of the I-26 project from NCDOT. So before we get into the final recommendations, just wanted to give an overview of the different criteria that we use to weigh our different options and make these decisions. Mostly want you all to have this for reference without going into each of these in detail, but just considering things like physical feasibility, connecting to actual destinations people are trying to get to, and community priorities. What are the cost impacts, things like safety. We're not going to ever propose or recommend something that's unsafe, but there are certainly some recommendations or alternatives that provide both better, more added safety and also more perceived safety for users. So getting into our first recommendations, this is looking at the northern corridor of the study. I will try and zoom in here. So ultimately, the recommendation that is being made, well, the options were to stay along the curb right next to the road on Broadway Street, or to add a small planting strip in between the road and a path, or to go up the hillside a bit and avoid being directly next to vehicle traffic. And that's ultimately the recommendation that's being made here. We felt it'll provide a better user experience, some more vegetation opportunities and vantage points. And also it avoids as much utility relocation that was going to be necessary for some of those other options on the west side. And then you'll see this section 2. This section is going to be constructed as part of the I-26 project by NCDOT. It goes under the overpass and will be a side path, a 12-foot side path with I believe, a 6-foot planting strip in between the vehicle traffic. And I have some images to give you a better idea of that in a moment. I'll just mention a few of the only cons about this hillside option is there are steeper grades than other options that we looked at, but it's still under 5%, so still would be ADA accessible. And ultimately, we still felt like it would provide the better user experience. And also, in some portions of the hillside option, there'll be a retaining wall required that might potentially get pretty high compared to other alternatives. And this is looking at $3.1 million for construction costs. So I've added some typical cross sections in here just to get a better idea of like what this would actually look like. So this is the hillside option. There's the existing travel lane, the existing sidewalk, which we think we would just keep, and then try and add signage to make it clear which path is the greenway and which is the better option for pedestrians and cyclists. And you can see here there would be a retaining wall required. This is this portion that would be constructed as part of NCDOT's I-26 project. So 6-foot planting strip and a 12-foot concrete side path, multi-use. All right, now we're getting into the recommended routes for the southern section. So this is a little bit, I'll just go ahead and say this is kind of different than other feasibility studies where we're recommending 2 different routes for further consideration, which will largely depend on future funding and available easements from property owners. So just understand that as we're looking at this, there's a portion that will be an either or, not a both scenario. So to begin, so this dark green line is where the existing greenway is and terminates at Elizabeth Street. And then we are recommending a neighborhood greenway connection on Elizabeth Street, Cumberland Ave, Bearden Ave, and then Bearden Ave to connect to Montford Avenue. I'll pause here because this is something that was always a big topic in our stakeholder engagement, and especially with the neighborhood. A neighborhood greenway is a new typology that the GAP plan introduced. So we're not very familiar with it here in Asheville, but it's not going to be what we typically imagine as a greenway. Like if you think of the French Broad River Greenway, we're looking at ultimately keeping the existing sidewalk as it is, and then adding some elements like signage and traffic calming to make it clear to people that this is a greenway connection, and also give priority to pedestrians and bicyclists over cars. And the next section is on Montford Ave, and they're proposing a side path on Montford Avenue. And as part of the feedback from the survey, we heard a lot of the destination points that people are trying to get to are along Chestnut or to the Tempe Avery Community Center. And so we just went ahead and recommended, since this is such a short portion, that the side path be extended to the intersection of Montford and Chestnut Street to provide that larger connection. And then there's the connection. There's also a recommended connection on Flint Street for that more direct connection we heard feedback for to downtown. From the section of Cherry Street to Haywood and Flint, there is enough right-of-way to add a bike lane, a buffered bike lane on both sides. And so that is what will likely be recommended. And another pro or advantage of this Flint Street connection is it's providing, like, this is the Harris Cherokee, the Harris like parking garage right here. And so that's like just another place for people to make a connection to get on the Greenway if they're driving to get there. And then by far the most complicated part of this project was trying to figure out the connection from Montford Ave over to the pedestrian bridge. And this, what we're looking at now, the green line, is a connection we're calling, what are we calling it? The off-street school connector. So this would go in between the existing Montford North Star property and the Chamber of Commerce. It's pretty steep right here, so there would be some switchbacks, and then it would go through this nice vegetative hillside area to make a connection through the school's property and make the connection over the Isaac Dixon Elementary School. In conversations with stakeholders, this was definitely the preferred route for this part of the alignment over what we'll look at next, which is the Hill Street connection, mostly just from a user experience connection and also a connection standpoint. This line in purple is the future planned Montford Greenway. It's, well, I should say the future proposed. It's not planned at this point, but that would just add another connection to that future connection that we're hoping to make. This, with including the off-street school connector, we're looking at about 4.5 million for this project, and the Flint Street portion would be around $160,000. And I am losing my voice. So the other option, everything is the same through the neighborhood. The Flint Street connection is the same, but the other option that we are proposing still be considered for future evaluation is just making a direct connection on Hill Street. Because there are different existing properties on the northern side of Hill Street, and then you have the interstate to the south, there's not much room to make significant improvements along Hill Street, and pedestrians and cyclists would still be either riding in traffic if they're cyclists or next to traffic as a pedestrian. So it's not necessarily an ideal user experience. And there are portions where it is so constrained for the existing properties that we really we don't have much wiggle room to widen the existing sidewalk. So in some cases, we're looking at a 12-foot sidewalk, but in some portions along Hill Street, it would likely be confined to a 6-foot sidewalk as existing conditions. The advantages of this recommendation or this alternative are that it's a little more straightforward in terms of constructability, and it's more affordable than the other option. This is around $2 million as opposed to the 4.5. So we are keeping both of these options in the report for further pursuit, and this would which alternative is pursued would be largely dependent on funding opportunities and future coordination with landowners. I'm going to be a little more brief looking through these cross sections, but again, this is the neighborhood greenway typology. So the existing sidewalks is what would stay. We wouldn't change those at all. There would not be any loss to parking. We did consider that and look at that as an option, but there are so many houses there that don't even have driveways that in this case, it wasn't really an option to remove on-street parking. Then likely sharrows would be added onto the road, as well as some traffic calming features and additional signage. Let's see. And this is the Montford Avenue section. There would be a 12-foot concrete side path. We did look at adding bike lanes or a buffered bike lane, but the section was so short that we felt that making the users and the cyclists cross as many times as they would need to make the connection just didn't make as much sense as a concrete side path did in this case. And we would need to lose parking on one side of the street. And we talked to the Montford North Star Academy about this and the school superintendent, and they were supportive of needing to do that. And then just quickly, if we did the off-street school connection, that would be a typology that looks more like a typical greenway, including in some sections a boardwalk as necessary, and also potentially a pedestrian bridge connection. And for the Flint Street, this shows a bike lane and 2-foot buffer on both sides. This street is used for event space, so they park those big charter buses and block the entire street when there's big events going on at the Cherokee Center. And so after discussions with them, we realized we couldn't really move the curb line, and we wouldn't be able to add vertical delineators for a protected bike lane. But we are going to look into, likely during the design phase, other opportunities for things like armadillo bike buffers or some potential buffers that will just help with visibility for the bike lane, but also could still be driven over by those charter buses if needed. And this shows the Hill Street typical cross section. So again, it would be 12-foot, basically backup curb next to the existing roadway. And in some places it would be constrained down to 6 feet. And there's not too much detail to go into with the phasing recommendations. I'll just say that the report is going to include cost estimates and also make recommendations for which segments of the greenway might make sense to build at the same time. And so that will be part of included in the report. And as far as next steps, our consultants are working on drafting a report right now. Staff will review that as well as our steering committee, and then we'll incorporate any final changes into a final report, which we'll bring to the Planning and Economic Development Committee for review, and then ultimately Council for adoption. I think these dates, it says May for PED, it's likely June, and then City Council would likely be July. So I know that was a lot, but
great.
Yeah, we'll
Thank
open
you.
it up now.
Thank you, Haley. There was a lot to explain, so I thought you did great. That was lovely. I didn't see any spelling errors or anything, so you passed that.
Great.
Y'all, I do want to make sure that we have time for our entire agenda, so I'm going to ask folks to limit their questions and comments if they're able to. But I do want to make sure that we have time to ask Haley questions. So the floor is open.
Oops.
Well,
Yeah, Randy, go
Yeah,
ahead.
since no one jumped in, I'll jump in because I know that you've might start hearing me talk. But
Sure.
hey, it's a lot of work for sure. And this was very hard in a lot of ways. I mean, in some ways the north side was somewhat easier, and that wasn't easy. But the south side is really hard because you're dealing with streets that are, weren't built for multiple use, to be honest, a long time ago. I mean, they were built for horses forever ago. So it's a lot of work, and it's really hard to do this. And Haley has to juggle what's practical and what's ideal, and uses of the buses that aren't parked legally in the street and all that kind of stuff too. So I just want to say good job, and we recognize that all you guys in transportation are not in ideal circumstances and doing a good job.
Thanks, Randy.
Haley, I do have a question just in looking ahead, and you touched on a lot of this in your questions, but I guess as a two-part question, I'm just wondering how extensive the easement issues might be. I know they could differ, and you don't have to go into detail, but whether it's one or two easements or whether it's multiple and how complicated that could be. And then just looking ahead about other points of opposition that might emerge, that so we can just think about how we promote this and continue to get buy-in. It sounds like you all have done the work to doing that, but we've also seen how that can implode on other projects. So I was just curious if you can comment briefly on both of those easements and potential opposition that might emerge down the road.
Sure. And I'll just say, Lucy, jump in if you have other comments, but the majority of the easements would be required if we do this off-street school connection. We would need an easement from the Chamber of Commerce, from the schools, and also from some of the adjacent property owners in this area. So that's why this is kind of our recommendation is not necessarily one or the other, and would require future conversations. And then on your question of like potential barriers that this project might come up against, I'll say that like throughout the stakeholder conversations and engagement, a lot of the things that came up were usually resolved once we talked through them, but a common theme was concerns about the existing safety around the pedestrian bridge and this area in general along Klingman Ave and the church right here. So I think like helping people understand the context of the East Patton Corridor study and the different changes Patton Ave is likely going to change, just helping them understand that our job as planners is to think further out, not just today's conditions, and think about the safety improvements and the way that this entire area is going to change in the future. That's what's coming to mind. And then another common concern, which we hear with every project, was about parking. But we're not losing parking except for along Montford Avenue. And there's the parking garage. There's also a developer along Broadway Street that, as part of their development conditions, was required to put an additional unpaved parking lot specifically for greenway access. So that's another great talking point and advantage that we have.
Y'all, any other comments or questions for Haley? Elise?
Thanks, Haley. I see your next steps like leading up to city council approval. What would it look like assuming city council does approve this? Like, what do the next steps look like after that?
Next step would, kind of going back to that initial like greenway process, we would need to identify funding for design and engineering to create like a design set, and then identify funding for eventually getting this constructed and paying for any easements that are necessary.
Joe?
Yeah, following up on Elisa's question, I sense, given the connectivity that this clearly would provide to the Patton Corridor and other related projects. It seems to me that the lift funding that the TDA offers would qualify for funding. I want you to certainly be aware of that as you move forward in that step. Thanks. Great job, Haley. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great comment. And that just reminded me, as part of this report, there'll also be a section on potential funding sources in the future and like potential grant opportunities and things like that.
That alignment goes right past the visitor center. You'd think the TDA would be all over it.
Right.
One can only hope.
Yeah, it's a great project. Any other comments or questions for Haley?
Haley, I did have one question about the letter of support. Does it need to talk about funding at all and certain allocation of funding or supporting the city in pursuing funding or anything like that? Or is it just support for this facility?
Jessica or Lucy might have more insight on that, but I think there's just one line that generally says, like, it's basically making the case this is a good project for the city and it's worth pursuing funding for, and we would likely use the letter of support when we're going for any funding, like in grant applications or anything like that.
Y'all, as we do have an action item related to this. In your minutes, you'll see a letter of support that's signed by me and on behalf of the Multimodal Transportation Commission. That I presume you've read this letter, and I'd like to open that up for discussion and any thoughts before we vote on a letter of support for the Reed Creek Greenway. And if there are no comments, feel free, please do make a motion.
Jack, I would just ask that the letter, you maybe want to slip a reference to tourism development, advantages in tourism development along the line of TDA's role possibly in the letter. But otherwise, I would support, I would move approval and let's get her done.
Yeah, Randy.
I second the motion.
Okay, as a second, are there any other discussions, additions, or comments? Would anyone like to consider what Joe is saying? Do we want to say something about tourism or leave that out? Elise?
I would definitely support what Joe is suggesting. I think we're talking about the very last line that says we encourage prospective funders to give this project serious consideration. I feel like maybe we could include something a little more powerful there. And certainly with the new LIFT funds being available, I think a strong case could be made as to why this project would qualify. And I know that TDA has supported other Greenway projects in the past, so I don't think it'd be a big stretch to consider them as a funding source.
Yeah, okay. Other comments or thoughts, folks? We can consider making that addition and running it by.
I think it's a friendly amendment, Jack. And I don't know if it needs further action. That's up to you.
Yes. Okay. That sounds fair. That's great. So we will vote on the letter as is with the potential for amendments. Kenny.
Yeah. Aye, of course.
Yeah. Sorry. I kind of threw that on you. And Joe Chesler.
Yes.
Lise?
Yes.
Randy?
Aye.
And Jack is an aye. So the motion passes. Thank you for your work on this, Haley.
Thank you all.
Y'all, we are moving on to unfinished business. And I want to make sure that we get ourselves to 4:45 so we have some time for committees to share updates towards the end. So the first item under unfinished business was to identify hands-on projects related to the GAP plan. This is something that we discussed last time, and Leanna has chosen to carry the torch on this one and help us out. And so what she has been working on and what she's advising as a potential, as a project, a hands-on project for this commission, is to work on the intercept surveys for greenways. It has a nice intersection with our work in terms of advocating for greenways as well as traffic calming. I do want to share a next step from Leanna, but I was wondering, Lucy, if you can just give us like a quick couple-minute overview of the intercept survey for folks who may not have been at our working meeting back in March.
I sure will. So the intercept survey is something that it gives us a lot of information from greenway users, and particularly information about if they are tourists or not. It is a great tool to use for economic development and showing the impacts, the beneficial impacts of greenways to the local economy. So we tend to, ideally you do this on a regular interval. The last time we did it was when we were doing the GAP plan. So now it's been a couple of years. But I will show you the document that we used, and we will be using the same style document. So it is something that's really easy to fill out while you're talking to people on the greenway. It asks questions about where you started your trip, where you're leaving it, if you're commuting for work or school or going to dining or whatever. It's something that you stop people while they're on the greenway to use, and you try to get them to fill it out. And so you want it to be brief, but it has very concise questions. So we don't have any interest in changing the document because we want the same information every year, right? So this is what the intercept survey looks like. And then it takes a lot of volunteers to be able to do this. We had it at the Glen Creek Greenway and also at the Wilma Dykeman Greenway, which was brand new at the time. And so we will probably do the same locations. At Glen Creek, it was close to the Botanical Gardens. And we had, I think, about 20 people working as volunteers on these intercept surveys. And in order to do that, we had a, I'm trying to do two things at the same time, which is never good. We had this sign-up sheet, which was a Google form, and it just really lays out what the intercept survey is, what the expectations are, the point person who will be leading the effort. So this year it'll be Leanna. And then it helps you sign up for the day and time that you would like to do. So you check all the ones that you're willing to do, and then Leanna will break all the volunteers down into like 2 to 3 hour segments of work doing the surveys. So it's a lot of fun, actually, once you get started. It's a very simple form to fill out. You get to talk to a lot of different people, and you get a lot of information about greenway usage.
Yeah, so folks, I think, the spirit of this is to engage folks who are willing to engage with the community and do some sort of get your hands dirty type of work. And this seemed like a need from the city and also a good project for us. Leanna's recommendation is to reach out to the group to form a planning team to sort of do some work in the background. And that's something that I'd be willing to serve on. But I'd just like to hear back from folks before we move forward on this, whether they're supportive, whether they feel like it's a good idea, or have any comments or thoughts. Yeah, Elise.
I'm super excited about this and would be very happy to participate. My one question is regarding these survey forms, is there any thought to also offering like a digital version? Because I imagine once you have all these paper forms, you then have to enter them in some way. So if you like got people on the front end to do some of that work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could be a possibility. And we do have some tablets that one of them actually has a wireless card. The other two would need to be hotspotted to someone's phone. But that is a possibility. I think at the end of the day, the paper forms might work easier, but I'm not sure about that. It's totally open to the group's work. And I just want to be clear, like when we do this intercept survey, we won't be relying just on MMTC members to be out there on the days on the Greenway. We will pull in volunteers just like we did for the bike ped counts. So yeah, it'll be, I think, a lot of bites, but light lifts every step of the way. It won't be too much work. But great question, Elise, and definitely we've got the technology to do it.
Y'all, any other thoughts or comments? Elise.
I have a follow-up question after Lucy mentioned a lot of bicyclists. How, and maybe to Randy, how do people who are cycling feel about being stopped to answer questions? And is there any chance that they might be underrepresented because they don't want to stop?
Randy.
Sure, it depends on the type of cyclist. So if you're, well, I mean, if you're commuting, you know, and you got to get to work, you're less likely to stop. Or if you're training or finishing a training ride, you're less likely to stop. If you're recreating, then you're more likely to stop. So it kind of skews the population right away from that. If we want to get people who are more, you know, like the training side, there's other avenues we can do that. And a lot of them use the greenways or the separated bike, you know, the enrollment Dykema, the separated bike lane is used a lot by people who want to go through there quickly. And they're not going to want to stop just because they're trying to get someplace, you know, and like when I go for a training ride, I have a certain amount of time I'm spending and I have to get back for a certain time. So if I stop, that messes that up. So yeah, it kind of depends on who it is. But if it's just someone who's riding more casually, they're much more likely to stop. And then again, that skews the results somewhat so too.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Y'all look for an email then from Leanna that sort of takes the next step of forming just a small planning group. So if you're interested in being engaged in this effort, there might be an opportunity either to do some planning for it in collaboration with Lucy or to volunteer. So again, no obligation. I'm grateful that you all show up at meetings and get the work done here, but it is an opportunity to support the city. I think, I don't want to say low hanging fruit because it's important and valuable, but it seems like something we can engage in because, greenways and these other projects take so long to implement. This is something we can put a check mark on and feel successful that we're contributing. Next item, y'all, is a recap of the in-person work session last month. And I just wanted to open the floor for any feedback and thoughts. I heard informally from just a couple folks saying they thought it was successful. Our plan right now is to do another in-person work meeting tentatively in August. I figured that would make more sense than July when probably many folks are on vacation. So August seems like a better opportunity to do it. But I just wanted, does anyone have any comments about, weigh in on whether they thought it was successful, whether they think it's worth continuing that model, and any tweaks that we might use to change it and make it more effective. Yeah, Jake.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the on-site. It was great to explore the new facility and see that they've got that beautiful splash pool for my son. But yeah, being able to work with people and just have like face-to-face conversations, sidebars, be able to discuss things like as a group and also separate, I think added a lot of value and notable conversation, as well as like future conversations that were kind of entailed from some of the sidebar. I'm all for having another meeting in August, and I'd love to see this become a regular item.
Elise.
I also really enjoyed our in-person working meeting. I really did like being at the grant center. My only suggestion might be that I recently attended a hybrid meeting at the Public Works building. They do actually have the technology to have a hybrid meeting. So if people are interested in that, the space isn't as pretty, but at least there's some technological potential to include people who couldn't be in person.
Yeah, it's a good thought. Other ideas, folks, or comments? Anyone opposed to doing the working meeting again, or other considerations that we should be thinking about? Randy?
Yeah, I'm sorry I had to miss it. I was at a camp, so I wasn't able to come, but I'm excited too, because in July, unfortunately, I'm going to be in Europe for the next meeting. So I'm glad we're moving to August, because I think the in-person meetings are so valuable. And I know our group has been hesitant to move to fully in-person meetings because it doesn't always work with the schedules of all the committee members. Although I think the commission members, I think we might want to revisit that, because I think some of the commission members who said they absolutely could not attend in person are no longer on the commission. So we might want to do another evaluation of that. But yeah, in-person just has so much value to it in so many different ways that I think we should continue to do that, at least occasionally, if not move to our every monthly meetings in person.
Yeah, and we'll keep our eye on the opportunities and how hybrid might become something that we can do in the future. I'm a little worried about just people not being able to show up when we do it live. So that's where I get a little concerned. I think it is more valuable to do an online meeting if we have a high turnout. But yeah, I feel like we moved the needle a little bit further by engaging among, with each other in person. We also had 3 members of the public, which was really cool. And so that might be something we can promote and nurture. That adds a completely, by the way, Randy, they participated in a breakout session, and that was really cool. So I think that's also something that seems to align with the spirit of this group, the engagement with the public. Are there any other thoughts or comments, y'all? We'll sort of continue to work on that August meeting, but it sounds like we'll move forward with that. Location to be determined. I also want to make sure that we have some time to continue our conversation about transit from the transit working group, and to continue to, push that forward. And I know the transit working group is doing work outside of our meetings. So I wanted to give you all an opportunity to report back on what you've worked on, in particular, a statement that you guys came up with that I think is an opportunity for the commission to weigh in on, although I think any kind of statements or anything like that obviously should be improved by the transit committee and then move forward. But I like the opportunity for us to be able to weigh in and think about these things and help push the conversation forward. So I want to turn it over to one of you all from the Transit Working Group to share the statement and anything you'd like about, next steps to move the needle forward on transit. And I don't know who to give the torch to, so I'll let you all fight over it. Joe, are you pointing at Elise?
I was. She's on the upper side of my screen.
Oh, I actually have been very busy with work lately and have not been able to attend any of the Transit Working Group stuff since we last met.
There.
So,
Kenny, that leaves you. You want to share the statement and work on that and talk a little bit about next steps? Do you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, go ahead, Kenny.
No, you go ahead. Just
No, I don't have it in front of me, so you go ahead. Clearly, it's an exciting venture, though.
I don't
want to
either.
lose some of it.
I do have the statement.
Okay.
I can read it if you like, Kenny.
That'd be great.
So this is a statement of the Transit Working Group, not the Transit Committee, but this is the Transit Working Group. So there is some overlap there. I just want to distinguish that. But their statement, which I'll post in the chat, is, and I'll read it out, is that effective transit is a public wonder. It enhances equity and community affordability. It saves time and creates convenience. It enriches a city. So Kenny or Joe or Elise, you want to kind of give us some context of what this means and what we should be doing with it or thinking about?
So coming back to the in-person meeting that we had, it was brought up, Elise, you gave that wonderful presentation, and it kind of focused the conversation on council priorities and how do we align our vision for our city with what the city council's already got on the brain. And it seemed like it was leaning towards affordability and then also equity. And so how does transit relate to those two topics? And so this is just a further push to get this moving in terms of how do we have a unified message that we can take everywhere we go? How do we talk to council about transit? How do we hammer it over the head of everybody who will listen to us, the benefits and the importance? And so this is just a way to try to keep that ball rolling up the steep hill. Anytime there's a discussion with anybody, we can kind of go back to this and say, well, transit is this and this and this, and therefore we think it's valuable and we support it. And so it's just kind of like wordsmithing. How do we simplify the message down to one or two sentences that we can all memorize and push forward? I'm not a huge stickler on the word wonder. It seems like Jared and Bill had this dialogue about wonder versus just public good. What does public good mean to everybody? Everybody's got a different connotation. You hear public good, you think of bare minimum, and then it's well, yeah, we're providing the bare minimum, but how do we elevate that to something more effective? And so we threw in that word of an effective transit system is not just a public good, it's a public wonder. What we have now is kind of the bare minimum. So how do we move it along? So I think where Bill and Jared at that last meeting, which I attended, they're just in that process of how do we wordsmith and how do we craft something that makes sense to everybody and is simple. And that point about aligning with the council's goals. We're going to have a new council next year, but this current council has a certain set of priorities and transit isn't really on that list. And so how do we take transit and make it part of their list? But there's an opportunity there for new city council members and getting their ear early and making this a priority for them.
Yeah. Well said. That's really helpful. Yeah. Comments or thoughts, folks, on that statement? again, just reemphasizing it should go back. Anything should go through the transit committee for them to ultimately wordsmith and then push forward.
Yeah, if I may, just real quick, pardon me, Elise, you want to go ahead? I just want to emphasize and thank Randy for his comments in the chat. It's clearly been educational to me to see how the benefits of switching from car ownership or car usage to personal vehicle usage to transit can enhance and improve a community's viability and provide more equity and access for all. That's one thing I've really focused on in our the outcome of our research. So we'll be more formulating that more. And to Kenny's point, clearly it's a way to convince people to try transit and make it a part of their daily lives, as opposed to once a week, once a month or so, which unfortunately has been my habit. But I'm changing. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Elise?
I like where this is going, and I really appreciate the work of the group to kind of put some of this together. And I understand why Bill and Jared has supported this idea of like public wonder. And I also understand the sticking with like verbiage that people are used to as public good. And so full disclosure, I like to use AI to help me when I'm trying to wordsmith things. So I put this into ChatGPT, and a word that it gave me back was transformative. So, if we were to change this to something like effective transit is a transformative public good, I think that kind of gets the sentiment, but uses words that people are, might be more used to hearing.
Yeah, my comment to that is, as an economist, I love the word public good. Wonder just sounds a little biased to me, is my only concern with it. Wonder is not measurable, whereas I think everything else, affordability is not an opinion, it's a fact, as Randy has showed us. So wonder just gets to me into a little bit of fuzzy territory of, what you can, it's there's some bias that can be in there, but I'm not gonna. Yeah, that's just my point. I like what you're saying too, Elise. I think there's some room to continue to wordsmith this, and but I love the spirit of it. It really is capturing and helping me help articulate, I feel like, or help all of us articulate what's important about transit and why we should be pushing it forward. Randy, floor is yours.
Sure. One thing is we want to look at what our audience is when we're putting forth these kind of statements. If we're putting them forth to transit users or people that are aligned with our mission already, then something like wonder makes a lot of sense and it resonates with them. If we're putting it forth to critics of our opinion, wonder is going to seem superfluous and not an objective criteria in which they can clearly evaluate what we're saying. So we need to be careful. It depends on who we're putting this message forward to. If we're just trying to sing to the choir, it's a great word. If we're trying to put it forth to people who are adamantly opposed to what we're doing or trying to be critical of what we're doing, then it may not resonate as clearly.
Yeah. Kenny, I think that, this goes back to the transit group is going to continue to work on this. I appreciate that they're keeping the entire commission up to date on, the direction that they're going. And I think this is a very smart first step. Kenny, what would be, and Elise and Joe, all of y'all who are members of this working group, can you tell us what the next steps might look like over the next few weeks of what we should be doing or what y'all are doing and how we might fit in as commission members? One person at a time, please.
I'm definitely gonna add some suggestions to that email that to those folks who have been involved in the working group. I was not involved at all in this original iteration of this, but I'm thinking once that gets solidified a little bit more, to probably go to the transit committee before our next meeting. I do know that their meeting last week was canceled, so I'm hoping that they are going to meet in May and can provide us. I think they meet the week before us, so hopefully they could provide some feedback and maybe get back to us before our May meeting.
Yeah, I would echo that. And I think what we would want to move towards is some sort of letter to council supporting initiatives, both current and in the future. To Kenny's point, we have a lack of full understanding, I think, among our governing body. That's not to say they aren't supportive in many ways. We want Jessica's budget to bloom, and as these initiatives roll forward.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all thanks to the Transit Working Group on your work on this, and we look forward to hearing more. Perhaps August gives us another opportunity to dive in a little bit deeper and to keep nurturing the conversation and making connection points. So we only have 9 minutes left, so I'm going to move on. Is there anything else you'd like to add at all, folks, on the Transit Working Group? Okay, thanks everyone. And poor Bill didn't get a chance to defend himself on Wonder, so we'll keep open to language there for sure. Y'all, I do want to save just a little bit of time for reports from any committees. And first of all, Joe, let me give you an opportunity for give us an update on the downtown Patton Avenue corridor feasibility study. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's exactly. It's very brief. The working group had its third meeting yesterday. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend in person, but there were some activities that were shared by the committee. The consultant team is basically working somewhat independently, but with great impact, dealing with meeting stakeholder groups involved in access issues along Patton Avenue and in the redesign of the I-26 improvements. They've met with property owners and businesses, and as I said, some stakeholder groups defined as large vehicle movements, ART, the schools, public works, etc. Looking at community services and associations dealing with usage along the corridor, and those have input some of the design alternatives being considered. They have begun to develop design renderings of various development along the corridor that may impact future road diet changes and recommendations. Looking at the roundabouts, as we've seen in the I-26 proposals, looking at the Hilliard-Patton location, the Patton-Klingman location, and the Klingman-Hilliard locations. Those are all targeted locations for roundabouts as part of the transition. There was an update on the NCDOT bid opening for the I-26 improvements. That's scheduled now for May 7th, the rebid, I guess, and includes a optimization and refinement period that will last for 180 days after that. So we're not looking for final decisions easily until late this year, which is a bit of a disappointment, of course. We all want it to be built yesterday. That's basically it. We continue, the consultant team, McAdams, continues to work with federal, state, and local entities to secure private funding, possibly in addition to enhanced state and federal funding for contributions to the corridor improvements as they emerge. And then we'll be meeting again in late May, and hopefully we'll have a little more solid recommendations out of that. That's it, Jack. Thank you, unless there's any questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Joe, for doing that. Any questions for Joe on it? Jake, do you have an update for us from the Neighborhood Advisory Committee?
Jack, excuse me.
Oh,
Pardon me, Jake. Real quick, I think you all understand Mike Zukowski's limitations over the next few months. I'm wondering if we might want to add another representative for the working group at some time. Maybe we could visit that at our next meeting if Mike continues to have limitations. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. We'll keep that in mind. Jake, you in any update?
Yeah. Just a quick note on what Joe had mentioned. I do live pretty much across the street from Mike, and I did send him a message letting him know to reach out if he does need anything. So there's always the chance that maybe we do have a meeting and I just control the computer for him if he's not in too much pain. So we'll see about that. As far as neighborhood advisory updates, Elise was nominated as a temporary or interim chairperson for the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, with Babette Mays stepping down from her position as it was the end of her term. We're still working on our subgroups. Our meetings are every other month, and at this point in time, we due to the holiday, we won't be having another meeting until, I believe, June. So we've got a couple months of a meeting gap, but we'll be working on our subgroups, including the Festival of Neighborhoods subgroup, until to keep us busy, essentially. The Festival of Neighborhoods subgroup is pushing on pretty hard and quick. We're in the process of recruiting volunteers and trying to make sure that we have enough people to not only help with planning, but also get donors and we're not allowed to call them sponsors. People that will be willing to donate things but not get sponsorship item, basically not credit for it. So that would be there's plans for possibly putting a stage up and having just kind of a open mic or performances from small bands. Still looking forward to having a table set up for the MMTC. I'll be volunteering that day, so I will be able to help with any coordination needed for that. Let's see. Elise, am I forgetting anything?
I was just going to add that the Neighborhood Advisory Committee is also accepting nominations for outstanding neighborhood volunteers. So if you know anyone in your neighborhood who is an outstanding volunteer, please navigate over to the NAC webpage and there will be a link down there where you can nominate that individual. Or if you're having trouble finding it, just send me an email and I will send you the link directly.
Yeah, it's great. I saw your video. Good job, Elise.
That's why she was nominated as a chairperson.
Yeah, good.
All right.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's all the updates I've got. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Let's see. Jared's not here to update us on P&Z. Are there any other updates from committees or commissions before we adjourn? Yeah, Randy.
This might come later from Active Trans, but
oh, thank you. Yeah.
Hannah Bagley gave a great presentation on part of the Swananoa Greenway feasibility study. So that is one project that's moving forward. Thanks a lot to Lucy's work, and a lot of other people's work too. But NCDOT is a component to that, and the city is a component to that, and so it's actually moving forward and it's happening. but there's a real big connector problem getting over Biltmore Street or Avenue, whatever it is they called at that point in time, right by Habitat for Humanity and the resale store and in the scrapyard. Oh, I mean, this is a really tough point. And so the MPO is working on that, and they have, two different solutions. One that's ideal but very expensive, and one that is will probably get done because of the less expensive. And so, but that's moving forward. So it's exciting news. And maybe, I'm not sure, Lucy, if that's planning to come to this group at any time soon, but it's just that this is a project, because so oftentimes, like you said, these Greenway projects, we have them in our vision, and 10 years from now, things happen, but this one's happening now. And so we're seeing the pieces being put together, and NCDOT again is responsible for both Meadow Road part, and then the Swannog Road part. And then we're responsible for a lot of pieces of it too. And we are, but the city is responsible for a lot of it too. And this is exciting to see it move forward, because it's a huge connector to so many different things, from Wilma Dykema to the one in Azalea Park and every place else too. So it's exciting.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Randy. Lucy.
I just wanted to add, for the Active Transportation Committee, they're planning a retreat, and it is for May 15th from 3 to 6, and then having a walking audit as part of the retreat on the following Friday on the 17th from 3 to 5.
Cool. Our MMTC
anybody can
members.
come join us for those things too. It's not just,
Yeah, if you're interested.
I'm not
Yeah,
even a member of the committee, but I'm going. So, it's like anybody can come.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. And thanks for the great work. And I'd like to thank you all for your engagement, MMTC members and adjuncts. And thank you to city staff who do such an amazing job, and our policymakers. So, y'all, I will now adjourn the meeting unless there are any objections to that.
I will give a plug too. If you want to watch bike racing tonight, starting at 5:30, Ring of Fire down in Carrier Park happens right now every other Wednesday.
Cool.
And there's 5 or 6 races a night. And so I'll be there racing 2 of them going straight from here. But in this one or the next one in 2 weeks, it's the Dark Family Night too. So you guys come there, and we were going to have a food truck, but they canceled it on us. But we'll have stuff there to make it fun for families. But if you just want to watch bike racing in a real easy environment, Carrier Park, it's called Ring of Fire. Right now it's every other Wednesday, starting at 5:30, going till about 8:15, 8:30ish. But you can come for just part of it.
Is it on the velodrome, Randy?
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's a track race called a points race we use road bikes. So it's interesting and fun. And you may be confused by how the people score and win, but it's just fun to be down there.
Cool. Thank you, Randy. Meeting's adjourned. See y'all next month.